Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Double Feature Podcast, where every week me and David bring two films together on our quest to marathon some flicks, kill a long weekend, and relax with some good movies. And we invite you along as we break these movies down at the Double Feature Picture Show. David, how you doing?
I'm feeling pretty spacey, Dean. It's been an out-of-this-world week. Both these movies were, quite an experience of another kind.
Yeah, the third kind. Dun dun dun. Yeah, because we're in Sci-Fi July now, aren't we?
Ooh, first week, yes.
And we get to talk about all the fun sci-fi movies, sci-fi tropes, and fun, weird things going on. And the first thing we have to cross is the alien genre of sci-fi flicks. David, what movies did we decide to watch this week?
Well, this week we decided to focus on mankind's first contact with another species from another planet. So we focused on a couple movies that do just that. We chose Arrival from very recent and Contact from way back in 1997.
Yep, and I think this is actually kind of a perfect pairing because when you kind of break these movies down, they're almost the same movie, right?
They're about the exact same thing. That's just the first, thing we received from somebody from all the way out there. Kind of different methodology, though. And I that was kind of my through line for these two this week, is focusing on the ways that the two movies handled the situations differently. It made for some interesting differences in theme, action, all those kinds of things. But both of them kind of handle it in their own unique ways. And I think we'll have a good discussion as far as the ways they were handled.
We're going to get into a deep philosophical discussion with these movies because they really liked getting into some philosophical discussions with themselves.
I think so.
I guess the first thing for the intro here is, David, do you believe in extraterrestrials?
I do. I think it's pretty... How would I put it? I guess I don't have to really make an allegory for this. I believe there's something out there. I'd like to, and who knows if we'll ever get to them. Who knows if I'll ever get to them. But at least it's kind of nice knowing that somewhere out there's another podcast with two guys talking about whatever the word for movies is in their species.
Yeah. Honestly, that's a very heartwarming thought. Granted, when we get to the rest of this month, we're gonna get to the really scary fucking shit you find in space, but that's for later.
No kidding.
But no, I'm in agreements with you. The idea that space is however big and we're the only things in it. That is, as they say in the movie, that's a big waste of space. So
good point.
Now that we've crossed the bridge as to get into these movies, you kind of have to believe there are aliens out there a little bit. What else can we really get in on this? Because Contact is based off a Carl Sagan book. Arrival is also based off of a short story novella.
Right.
So I don't know. Where do you want to get started with this little introduction of the alien genre flick?
I think it's kind of interesting to notice the difference in time here. Being that one movie was made, I guess that's 25 years ago almost. There's some clear differences, and one definitely has to do with a much more kind of quiet, comfortable time in which things had a way they were done. And the other that's made much more recently is kind of this unorthodox diving deep into what really would happen if the event occurred. And I think that's fine because both, whether or not they're necessarily about the aliens, I think measure more about humanity. I think that's kind of the thing I also picked up on, is it's a little bit of a mirror for we see aliens, but what does that say about us?
I think a lot of what's going on in these movies is in that terms of humanity, how people react with their mind versus how they react with their emotions. Contact feels a lot more like we're going through a very logical line of thinking in terms of like alien contact, whereas Arrival feels like this is what like human emotion would kind of spiral out to once we made contact with aliens. You know, I don't know what this is, so I'm going to be scared and attack it. The other one is I don't know what this is, so I'm going to examine it and figure it out. And we have that kind of like dichotomy going on with the two movies. I mean, it's apparent in both films, but one leans more into it than the other. So, it's going to be interesting.
I think so. Yeah.
But David, do you know what the first alien movie ever made was?
No, I actually don't.
Well, it was Trip to the Moon back in like 1908, man.
Well, yeah, I guess so. Now that I think about it,
We've been doing alien movies for 100 years.
That's kind of crazy to think about because that is one of, I don't know about one of the. Well, I guess it is one of the first if I get my history right. But you know, but you wouldn't normally think about that movie if you see it nowadays as an alien movie because there's magic and other things in it as well, and moons made out of gunk and cheese. But it's kind of
moon's not made out of cheese.
No, actually, that's a different planet. You're gonna have to go further out. That's why cheese prices are getting pretty expensive. But it is kind of interesting to think about that's an alien movie because I never thought about it like that before, and it's kind of interesting then to really measure when adding it to our two movies the different ways that we think about aliens. Because the two, then you get into all that stuff from the 50s and 60s and all that, how they used to see aliens. Things like The War of the Worlds, all the Flash Gordon movies, I guess you could say, although those were kind of more humanoids.
I mean, Plan 9 from Outer Space. We made making alien invasion films for as long as we've been making movies, basically. Which is interesting.
Yeah. Good insight there, Pete. Good insight.
See, I do research.
You got to open that third eye for aliens this week.
We're going to get into that with Contact because we have a returning actor, Mr. Jack Busey, in that movie.
Yeah.
And yeah,
that's who it is. I couldn't recognize, I couldn't recall who it was. That's interesting.
You couldn't recall. It's like, this guy looks exactly like Gary Busey, and I just can't. Who is he?
Well, it's just like I was sitting there being like, I've seen that guy somewhere in a comedy, I think. Although his role in that movie was kind of funny if you look at it a certain way.
I mean, he was in our Tomcats episode way back in our what is it? Was it a romantic comedy month?
I remember he is the man who lost his testicle.
Yes, he did, and got a walnut back in return. But yeah, David. So where do you want to get started with these two movies?
Well, I guess before we get into it, let's give these people those quick rundowns, the log lines,
so they have an idea of what we're talking about.
Right. So those log lines for this week. Arrival is about a fractured linguist that takes the request of the military to investigate the language of the first alien race to reach Earth. Contact is about an orphaned astronomer that takes a leap of faith into the final frontier after her satellite team receives a coded message from the void of space.
Yeah, that's about right. These both sound like X-Files episodes, just blown out into like feature length.
Practically. Honestly.
But yeah, so I watched Contact into Arrival. What about you?
I did as well, because I wanted to go, the movie that was made first, and then what we now think of it being the smarter beings that we are far into the future, that is 2021.
Yes, the far off future of 2021 from like 1997. I just realized 97 was a long fucking time ago. You could have graduated college by now.
Quite a bit.
Yikes. But let's go into Contact. And for some context, so people know kind of what this movie was when it was released. The film was released in 1997. The highest grossing film of that year was Titanic, which made all the money. And we actually had some notable film debuts of Orlando Bloom, Gerard Butler, and Olivia Wilde. And none of them are in this movie. But the movie was released 1 year after Carl Sagan died, who was the author of this book that the movie's based on. And if you don't know who Carl Sagan is, was Neil deGrasse Tyson before Neil deGrasse Tyson. Neil deGrasse Tyson describes Carl Sagan as Neil deGrasse Tyson before Neil deGrasse Tyson. The guy's super smart. Big space guy. But yeah, that's kind of that was the world that Contact was released in. It was also the 90s. So yeah. But David, where do you want to start with talking about this movie? Because it's kind of a heady movie.
Yeah, I would definitely say a heady movie. Quite a long movie. We got about 2.5 hours, I think. Around the final runtime. But they leave no stone unturned. Kind of that quick rundown of the plot. Jodie Foster is I guess she's orphaned at a certain age, although it seems quite pathetically, because I swear at that wake for her father, it seems like nobody really gives a shit where his daughter was.
It was a little fucked up, right?
A little, yeah.
Because there's like a lot of people at that wake, and she's just wandering around, just big chilling. No one's like, hey, who's gonna take the orphan girl after this? I was curious about that. Like, no meme, because they never bring it up. Like,
she went to go live with her aunt now. She's taking on the mortgage.
I guess
that's why she was so sad. But this little girl, her dad dies of an undisclosed. I think they said it was a infarction, as they say on King of the Hill, myocardial infarction, heart attack. They could have just said
basically a heart attack. Yeah, his heart gave out.
Cool, I guess. And there's some spilt popcorn, but we flash all the way into the future in Central or South America. It's Venezuela, I think. That's what they say.
Yeah, because that's where that actual giant satellite thing is down in like Venezuela or South America.
Right. So we get to see these breathtaking shots, I will say, of this satellite relay station in Venezuela, in which they are sending signals out into the unknown and trying to see if they can listen in for anything back. If you kind of know anything about these, they're giant cavernous dishes built into the hills of a landscape where you can take in more waves coming from space. She is a lead radiologist or something like this. I don't know the quite exact term at this station, working on a team with a blind guy who is kind of there as a plot point.
He's blind, so he can listen better. This movie has a Daredevil reference in it.
Exactly.
Right?
And then who else would show up other than Matthew McConaughey, pretty much just playing Matthew McConaughey, who is an author trying to tell people that technology is bad.
Yeah. Okay, so I know last week I said, dude, Brad Pitt's in this movie, you'll like it. And I was mistaken. It was not Brad Pitt, it was the Texas Brad Pitt, Mr. Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah.
And okay, is this before Matthew McConaughey became a good actor?
When did Matthew McConaughey become a good actor?
I mean, I thought he was good in True Detectives. That's just me.
I'm kidding. That's fair. I do think it's kind of true that Matthew McConaughey is good when he gets to play him like kind of a uniquely Americana piece, like in True Detective. That's where he fits in, kind of, because he has such a thick accent. It's very Southern, and it doesn't really transform at all in most of his roles. So it's I don't know. I mean, it works here because he's just kind of like this angel that floats everywhere in the movie. It's weird because he's just an author, but he also finds his way into places like the press room at the White House and like with these secret government. I don't know. It's weird.
He ends up on a government like a secret government board for the discussion of extraterrestrial life, and that book better have been fucking amazing. I need to know, does Stephen King have a seat at the extraterrestrial board meetings if aliens show up?
Pretty much.
Is that what's gonna happen?
Because like that book he's writing about really is only like, it's like a New York Times bestseller. Big whoop. Does that really qualify you? I don't know. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
Either way, so he and Jodie Foster kind of form this love affair of sorts, in which she can't fully commit to him because she's enveloped in her work, and then he wants to commit to her but will let her go because he's just rolling with it.
All right. That's just how it goes, man.
That's just how life goes for him. And eventually the funding is cut off for the dish plant, so they have to find a new place to go. Where else does she go other than to Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos? I mean,
okay, I know Jeff Bezos wasn't like a famous person, rich guy in 97, but John Hurt just looks like Jeff Bezos, right?
Yeah, if I have my history correct, I believe Amazon.com was probably getting its legs going in 1997. Somewhere around then, right?
I don't think so. That might be too long ago. Because, actually, wait 2 seconds.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I remember at least this bit of history in that Bezos started in like a one-room office that he and his wife funded together in New York or something like that during the dot-com boom.
Okay, well, fuck me. It was 95. That's when Amazon became a thing, and it only sold books.
Well, Robert Zemeckis, which, by the way, lovely return to the show,
Yes.
he predicted the future. Because now Bezos is going into space, so...
Bro, I would be so mad. How mad would you be if, like, we make alien contact, and like, Jeff Bezos is the one who like actually made alien contact for the first time, so he has to be remembered in history books for eternity. He's the billionaire we can never forget.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing that's interesting about both these movies is that, and you kind of do need it to make a movie about this because it's more dramatic that way, but the contact isn't the result really of any human involvement other than that the aliens finally find us. It's not we find them, which is... would make for a much more interesting story of the world over. And there's probably those kinds of stories out there. But anyways, so we meet Jeff Bezos, and he will fund a satellite array field in New Mexico for Jodie Foster to just drive her Impala around and use a laptop that looks like it was built by Legos.
It was 90. It was 97. This is how they looked.
Yeah, you know. It's what they had.
Also, how deep is this guy's pockets? Because she doesn't find dick all for like 4 years.
Yeah, and it's furthermore, it's like I don't even really understand what his company is. Yeah, I never picked up on that. Did you?
No, I have no idea. I just know that he's insanely wealthy, and his money's in something that is never really explained. Kind of like a Jeff Bezos.
1997, I'm going to guess oil company, honestly. But, I mean, who knows? It could be also based on that lobby where they just have those two hunkin' TVs in clear 1997 fashion. It could be an aerospace or something like that thing, which would make more sense.
I mean, Carl Sagan had gone on record that, or Robert Zemeckis, when he was making the movie and he envisioned the billionaire character, he thought, what would happen if Bill Gates was also Lex Luthor? And that's basically the precipice of that characterization. So, you know, literally Jeff Bezos is what they thought, you know, just Lex Luthor version of Bill Gates.
That's fair. He's an interesting character, you know. It always made for some fascinating points in the movie, I'll say.
I was kind of annoyed we didn't get to see more of what was going on with him. But
kind of. I think I'll have a point about that later, about the theme. But we move on. Now that she's got her plant, that's the new problem. It's going to be in jeopardy again. But what do they get finally?
Contact.
A message. Hey, what's that message?
It's Hitler.
Oh God.
Mm-hmm.
An interesting choice.
Well, okay. So here's the thing about that. Now, the reason why Hitler's the first thing aliens would find of Earth, like Earth transmission, is a completely scientific one. At the Olympics in Germany, when Hitler made that big televised announcement, it was the most powerful television transmission the world had ever seen up to that point, and it was the first one to like break out of the atmosphere into space, basically. So aliens, if they were listening, that would be the first thing they would hear is Hitler.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because I think Zemeckis makes a good gag out of it, where the first thing they see is the swastika while they're trying to fix the image.
Yeah, and they're just like, "What the? What? Can we send them anything else? Literally anything else?"
Yeah, but you know, so through that they get this cryptic message in which they start the decoding process, which is a big part of both of these alien movies. Mm-hmm. That decoding process eventually leads to a meeting with Jeff Bezos in which he magically just is the one to come up with the solution.
Because he has money, apparently. Which, okay, so the thing is like, they get these transmissions and they're like, oh, it's this weird sequence of like letters, numbers, whatever, and it's like printed out on like paper, which is another weird thing. And they're just like, it's supposed to be in a certain sequence, but we can't figure it out. And he's like, oh, it's not supposed to be flat. It's in a cube. And I'm like, that wouldn't make any sense because you still don't know where things start and end. Right?
Or do they start or end? Time is a flat circle, Dean.
Look, that's in the second movie, all right? That's not in this movie. Because
honestly, a little bit in this movie, I think. I think like towards the second half, we're starting to get into that territory where things are like,
time is meaningless. Don't worry about it.
All over it, yeah.
Yeah, but that's a point in the movie where I'm like, that seems like something an idiot would use on his luggage. But whatever. So they figure it out. So they figure out the cube puzzle thing, and it's blueprints for a machine. Yes,
a sort of superstructure that, in theory, although this is one of the gripes I'll have with the movie later. In theory, this structure will create a field of sorts from a gyroscopic movement that's literally like super massive. We're talking El Capitan massive.
Yeah.
Which
El Gigante.
They thankfully hide in kind of like the smoggy distance whenever it's on screen, for the most part. So it looks a little better. And then they're going to drop a ball into the middle of the sphere, in which passing through that will transport this person wherever the aliens want them to go, I guess, is what they discern. So there's a lot of construction in which the evil guy who took funding away from Jodie Foster at the beginning of the movie is now the guy who snakes his way into the position to go.
Yes, we got a return of Mr. Tom Skerritt, who decides he wants to screw over Jodie Foster just one more time because he's been nothing but an asshole the entire movie, and we need a good villain, right?
Yeah, and I will say, I hated that guy, so he did his job.
Yeah,
he certainly did his job.
It's cool because he's not a mustache twirling villain. He's just a bureaucratic kind of dick. Like, he's not going out of his way to ruin Jodie Foster's life. He's like everybody's obnoxious boss.
He's kind of like a Thomas Edison character, where he's like taking a little bit of credit for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Or so they say. Dun, dun, dun.
We'll get into that.
Yeah. But of course, what else happens other than religious extremism? And we get our first moment in the movie where there's a bomb and some explosion and some kind of more heightened drama happening Of course, this
Because,
destroys the
you
ball,
know,
and the mission is delayed.
and so Jodie Foster could go on the mission because Mr. Jack Busey showed up in the movie.
Yeah, really sucks having that one nut. You know, I don't know if this plays into the conspiracy, but is this rumored that Hitler only had one nut? And if Jack Busey also had one nut, connect the dots, people.
Dude, they're listening. They know. Yeah. All right. Water's turning the frogs gay. Okay, so I'm sorry, but like I really like this movie, and then as we're like explaining the plot again, it's starting to occur to me that there's some dumb shit going on here.
Yeah, because like from here on out, it's basically that Jodie Foster gets the role to go. Fine, you know, that's pretty much what was going to happen. Matthew McConaughey makes one last plea that they need to make a baby together, and it doesn't work because she wants to go see where the aliens are, of course, because Matthew McConaughey being here is starting to look more and more like it was just another name added to the movie. And when she finally goes, that's when all hell breaks loose, but it's interesting, that's for sure.
Oh, are you talking about the beach scene?
Yeah.
Ooh, okay, because it's supposed to look weird. Like that, it was on purpose to look trippy. But that whole dialogue is... Because, yeah, and I get the reason. Because when she gets back, they have the whole court scene or whatever.
Yeah.
And the whole precipice of the movie finally gets laid out. It's, you know, science and faith and yada, yada, yada. You kind of have to have both for hope. But, okay, we got to talk about this movie in whole, right?
Yeah. That's pretty much it. There was a lot to go over with that plot. So, you know, it's like, let's finally like break this thing down, you know? I mean, we got a lot to go over left here.
So David, I need to know, what's the theme of the movie? Is it that, you know, religion is ridiculous because it leads to extremism in the face of science? Or is it that science is so cold that if that alone you just become this husk of a human? What is the point of the movie? What's the theme? What's the messaging here?
Well, I feel like, and this is what I picked up on, even in the analyzation of religion in the face of what a lot of people say is like, you know, religion dispelling proof that when aliens exist, you'll disprove the existence of God. Which is kind of like the Venn diagram there is a little bit not overlapping when you think about it, or if you think about it enough, although you really don't need to. I think for me, it comes down to this idea of just like faith in a religious sense and faith in a scientific sense. Where like for the whole movie, Jodie Foster's faith in the discovery of extraterrestrial life was the thing that kept her going. And for Matthew McConaughey's character, who kind of plays this kind of misplaced antagonist in the form of a love story versus an actual antagonist, he's kind of this other side of the argument where his crusade, we'll say, of faith is that maybe we're better off just kind of knowing that they're out there, and then that we'll find out eventually through the proper channels, not these risky ones that are. But it's like that argument just falls apart because I think Zemeckis tried to put that out there, but did it in the wrong way. Because in my opinion, when you tell a story, you're eventually going to come to one or the other side. It's not really a play. Like rarely do you kind of leave something up for so much interpretation that you just are like, it could go either way, because that's like an unsatisfying story. And while I don't think we're left with an unsatisfying story, I think we're just left with neither argument really wins.
Yeah, that's like my problem with the movie, because at the end of the film, when she's sitting in the courtroom and all this other stuff, where the basically where the tribunal is interrogating her, because she says, I was out in space for like 18 hours, and they're like, you fell through the machine in one go.
Yeah.
And
It's like
you
her
didn't
Joan of Arc
go anywhere.
moment.
Yeah, her Joan of Arc moment. And they drill her for this, and they're like, hey, yada yada yada, you're just crazy. Like, you gotta see, you have no proof. And she's like, you know what? Yes, I could be crazy, because that's the whole deal with, I have no proof, but I have faith in it. I believe in this. This happened. And it's like, her belief in aliens is like paralleling the whole Joan of Arc, like, I believe in God. God talked to me. I just can't prove it, but I know what happened. And I'm like, are they trying to make a parallel argument where a belief in alien is the same as the belief in like a holy deity? Are they trying to make that parallel? Because that's kind of what's going on here.
Kind of, and I think that's kind of I don't want to say the fallacy of the movie or anything, but it's like the fallacy of approaching this story at the time, I think. And Zemeckis, like we've touted on the show before, and even recently, is responsible for some great stories like Roger Rabbit and Back to the Future and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like, this is for a director to attack the first contact with aliens. You can either do it in ways like Steven Spielberg has done, and it kind of becomes like this unanswered question even by the end of the movie, right? You could attack it in other ways where it's totally a horrific thing. You could attack it in ways where, like in Independence Day, it's just a massive war that happens.
It's an action movie.
But like this and Arrival both attack it in the same way, where it's like, well, let's not jump to one side or the other initially. Let's go through this logically as possible and figure this out. And of course, Zemeckis adds the religion into it. Arrival doesn't. That's like flat out not really there in Arrival, versus it's definitely a part of the story in Contact.
It's a huge thematic point in Contact where it's asking those kind of questions.
Yeah.
Because I that's the whole thing, because I haven't read the book that it's based on, but I know that much of the book, that's what it was really hammered down on, because Carl Sagan, being super science fancy man, he wanted to make a book as accurate to how contact with aliens would work if it were to ever happen. And the whole religious stuff was just him like doing that thought extrapolation of, well, what would happen if aliens make contact? Religious people would have some words about this, right? And that's kind of why it got extrapolated. I wonder if this is more of a problem with adaptation versus like interpretation.
Yeah, I think I fall back on it was just like a project in over its head. Because by the time you get to the end, it's like this whole religious thing kind of, and I've never read the Carl Sagan story, so like I don't know what the ending to that per se is. But I feel like just the insinuation that alien life means, like you said, this ascension to another level of being and or a new deity for us to actually discover. It's all these things where it's like, well, what if that alien life has just been around intelligently longer than us and still sent this, but it's like, because there's that whole flash in that climactic scene where there's a civilization she comes across. Mm-hmm. Go down there. That's what I want to know about.
Well, and here's the other thing, because the movie even cops the fuck out about answering that question when they're on the beach. Because Jodie Foster's character asks the alien dad version that she's talking to on the beach, which we're going to get into that. And she's like, did you make the wormhole? I was like, no, those were made by beings we don't even understand millions of years ago. Billions of years ago, long before we ever came. They're an unknown thing. I'm like, are you literally, as the alien species in this, are you copping out and saying God built your wormholes? Are you copping out that the alien species that's made contact and is able to download Jodie Foster's brain is like, no, God made the wormholes. We didn't make this. What?
Okay. I don't know. I mean, like, so, and I agree with you totally. It's that it's a cop out. It's a lot of special effects that I feel like they planned on, and then when they finally got to them, and they probably look really good in 1997, but in 25 years later, especially after watching Arrival, which the special effects in that movie really aren't like over the top. It's really not when you think about it. A movie I think I would probably put much closer to context is like Interstellar on that plane. And that's another time for another story. But it just becomes this thing where it's like, well, I was going to bring this up during Arrival, but it's kind of how I feel about Contact in that it's a very anthropocenic way of viewing alien life. It's what we as humans want alien life to be, not what we think they would be if we think through it more logically, like the movie tries to go through in the beginning. And I think that's what, and I was going to mention this later, but I think that's what Arrival ends up doing a little bit, and we'll get into that. But, you know, I mean, it's just like this beach, and the cop-out for me is when the alien assumes the form of something familiar to Jodie Foster so that it's not so alien. And I'm like, no, that's what we've been waiting for. Come on.
We want to see what the fuck they look like, which, okay, and I know that South Park made a joke about this like decades ago, but the joke still lands. Why the fuck would you hurl this woman light years away only to show up as something she's already seen before? No, blow her fucking mind. Be like, yeah, no, I'm a giant like 40-foot tall alien tentacle monster. What's going on? God made the wormholes, but don't worry about that. I really wonder if this movie wouldn't be ripe for a remake. And I know remakes and like stuff like that are kind of like Santa Sanctum. You just don't remake movies because 90% of the time the remake's kind of shit.
Yeah.
But this movie feels like it would benefit tremendously from a more modern interpretation of like society, and also like the effects would probably work a lot better.
And especially when some of this stuff has kind of happened in certain ways. Like, I don't know if you thought about this, but during the scene where she's going back out to the satellite array and there's the whole festival of lights going on in the outskirts, I immediately thought that's the Area 51 takeover. Like, that technically kind of happened, although it was a joke. Yeah, nobody showed up, technically.
I know. I like how you say technically. When people did show up, they just didn't have the balls to go on property. Like that.
Or put on all these fucking musical performances. I was like, wow, that's a lot of different musical performances going on from different alien groups.
Dude, it's for the aliens, man.
Yeah.
They need to know our culture and that we rock and roll. So, but yeah, I think this movie would actually just be perfect to just see another interpretation of it. But don't get me wrong, honestly, it feels like the movie still has very interesting things to say. It's just, I don't... Try and help me out here. Because I feel like the messages and the themes and the things when it's trying to say are like really profound, really interesting thoughts on like faith, humanity, on like the idea of there being something out in the stars and how that's like an allegory for God. And this has a very deep thematic understanding of humanity, but it's the stuff around it that I feel is kind of falling apart. And like, it's like the execution is wonky. Bless you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I agree. I think I feel like a remake would probably be fine. I think too, it's just kind of the general theme of the time. Whereas like Zemeckis in 1997, I don't know what's coming.
The aliens are coming.
The government is stopping me from talking about the aliens. Of course, that'll get cut out. But either way, another one might come. They might come in threes. The point being, I think in 1997, with Zemeckis, there was a kind of a sheen over most of these because that's the other thing I got from this movie. It's a blockbuster. That's what they're going for here. That's why McConaughey's here. That's why there's shots on
here.
The hoods of old cars. There's a whole bunch of that going on here. And I just think that that's kind of also what the reasoning is when they had to go and try and make this more commercially viable, it had to be shown a certain way, which gets in the way of the whole argument of the fact that we're talking about a really important,
big, profound
subject.
Thing. Yeah.
Because I go back to this, the religious extreme in the movie. Yeah, there would be if aliens came to Earth, all hell would break loose. Kind of like we'll see in a moment, but the way they end up portraying it in the movie is a very safe way of looking at it. In my mind, I feel like it'd be a lot scarier to look at and think about than just a guy who looks like he should be in a
Christian rock band.
Yeah. he's like a cross between Chris Angel Mind Freak and like a sex cult leader, but with some Christianity sprinkled on top.
Yeah, basically. He looks like if Gary Busey just found religion. He's Jack Busey. But yeah, it is fascinating because I feel like that's kind of the thing in the movie where it approaches these subjects, but it backs off just before it reaches a conclusion.
Yeah.
Or with the religious extremism thing, it's like, we acknowledge this is a thing that's happening, but we're gonna let off the gas before it gets too bad. Granted, we have the religious extremist terrorist bomb the giant mechanism and tear it down, and then we have the biggest fucking Deus Ex Machina in cinema history, where it's like, that $3 trillion like alien thing that almost bankrupted like 15 countries, and we had to barter with thousands of other countries just to get this thing made in like 3 months. Yeah, we built a second one in Japan. What? What? You fucking what me now? You built 2 of them? And then the Jeff Bezos guy is like, well, that's the thing about government spending. Why build one when you can build a second one and keep it in hiding? And I'm like, no, fuck you. That's too much goddamn money.
Yeah, I'm gonna look up what the richest man in the world's net worth is right now.
You mean Jeff Bezos?
No, it's not Jeff Bezos anymore since the divorce scene.
Oh, there you go.
French fashion tycoon Bernard is the world's richest person this Monday morning, as of May 24th, 2021, with an estimated net worth of $186.3 billion, putting him $300 million above Jeff Bezos. So that's kind of cool that Jeff Bezos is unseated, but I'm sure we don't need to go talking about the standings of people who have, and there's inordinate amounts of money. But what is interesting to me is that even today, when we've probably had the richest people ever, well, yeah. I know there's for adjusting for inflation, all that, but
there's one person in human history, I believe, that is considered the most wealthiest person to have ever lived, even adjusted for inflation, and that was the king of Mali. And yeah, I think his net worth was actually in the trillions of dollars because he owned all the gold in Africa. That was because he was the king of Mali. It's whatever. A weird historical thing that's irrelevant. Cut it out later, but whatever.
No, I mean, when you're the king of Mali, you make a lot of sales selling those pills in bathrooms, Dean. I mean,
it's true. This was in ancient times, but whatever.
Well,
yeah,
you don't know how rich that drug dealer from down the street is.
Jesus Christ.
I'll jam that one in there. So this is the interesting thing to me. We don't even have the price tag of this object. Even, well, technically it's about 2/3 paid for. Not even that, by the richest man in the world, in which he would have to give up all of his money.
All of his wealth, everything.
Which, technically, because he's also dying of cancer, coincidentally, they kind of get away with that, so I guess it's possible. And I get too. So this is kind of one thing I was hoping for in this movie as like my final wish.
Wait, David. It's $3 trillion.
No,
Even if he
I
gave
think
up
they
all
say
of
it's
his
like
money,
a third of a trillion. I think they
no,
said that.
I think they said it was 3 trillion.
Really?
I can't remember, but it was a shit ton of fucking money.
Much does the
Thing in
structure
contact costs.
contact cost? Yeah, because I think I thought I remember saying, like, hearing this in one of those like news reports that, of course, they have one of these.
Yeah, which is another. We have a cameo from Bill Clinton in this.
No, not how
cool.
much do contacts cost.
Fucking people, man.
Vamp me for a little bit while I find this scene because I'm interested to know.
Well, I'll just keep going on about this because it's one of those things where, like, you're invested in the movie as it plays out, but then I know plot holes are kind of a thing that really don't matter that much as long as the movie's good overall. But these are really big ones that kind of break down that logical thing that's going on. Because the whole movie hinges on the fact that they're building this giant structure that's going to send them to alien life forms, whatever. And it gets destroyed, and that's supposed to be a big downer moment. And then they're like, oh, don't worry, we have a second one. Which already is ridiculous. Then the other thing is when they get there, we have the other hurdle of she travels to space, meets her dad, and it's just kind of disappointing. It feels like the whole third act just kind of falls apart after a while. And that's where I have kind of problems with this movie, is the third act just starts breaking apart. But David, did you find an answer?
No, I didn't, and it's frustrating. But I'm gonna put my foot down and say it's a third of a trillion. You could say 3 trillion. It doesn't really matter. Nobody has ever had that amount of money in human existence. So
more you know. Yeah.
Yeah, so I agree. Like, the third act falls apart for me, and the thing I was kind of expecting in the first half of the movie, and why I was kind of into it for the first half, and if it would have stayed with it, this probably would have been my more favorite movie this week. I was expecting a movie more about the conspiracy about aliens rather than the contact with them, because what we get set up is this scientist who is trying and failing to garner like funding interest and public interest in her search for alien life, and when it finally happens, the government still is there to intervene. And in my mind too, I kind of feel like the government would be more hands-on about the first contact of aliens at the beginning, rather than it being a privately funded. They would have seized that motherfucker real quick. Real quick.
Also, when they go in and Jodie Foster is talking to James Woods and it's like, hey, can you get the guys with the guns out of here? This is a private facility. I'm like, honey, you have first contact with alien life. This guy could take you outside and shoot you, and he'd be fine.
Yeah.
His name is National Security. That's his name. He's not a character. He's a board.
Which is something that I'm not surprised by, being this again from 1997, where there was
time.
A lot of patriotism in the country, and I just feel like that portrayal of the military is what would come out. But I was waiting for that, like, all the president's men. Great, you found aliens. Now it's our job. You can go away. And now the rest of the set, like the second half of the movie, is her quest to kind of like infiltrate or get the word out or all these things, in which Matthew McConaughey would then have a lot better of a role in my mind, and kind of reining her in and saying, it's like, listen, even if you get the word out, think about what it's going to do to people. Because that makes more sense. Him being an author who just wrote about faith, trying to protect people's faith, when that's what people associate aliens with, for, like we kind of talked about, for whatever reason. But
I think it would also lean farther into this Joan of Arc's like tale they're trying to play out, because that's kind of what it feels like a little bit, where Jodie Foster is just playing Joan of Arc, except instead of God, it's aliens.
Yeah, and two, would have totally facilitated that whole like trial of treason moment, because if she leaks like government secrets, just like Snowden or all those others, she'd be tried for treason or as a whistleblower of some sort, and that's a realistic like scenario. So I don't know. I mean, I get they still need to go through the whole.
And if we go with that line, then we miss out on the alien stuff.
Yeah.
What
kind of? I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. I think that's kind of the thing you balance when making a movie is: are you making it about a story of something, or are you making it about the visuals of something that you want to sell? Which I feel like is that what that lane is. They want to sell this crazy sci-fi story when really it could still be a sci-fi story, but the sci-fi comes from the fact that, it's just about this subject that pertains to the sci-fi genre. I don't know. It's weird.
This is a movie that's a lot more complicated than it should be.
Yeah, and I'll give it this much. It's a lot better for it. It's a lot better for it just leaving some of these things up to interpretation and an attempt being made. So we can't, I enjoyed it by the end of it, I'll say.
And I did too. And that might bring us to the end of this half of our double feature, because I think it's about that time for us to arrive to part 2 of this double feature in Arrival, right after this.
Dean, I found a great way for us to do something cool and to make a little money on the side.
Great. I've been looking for a new place to put my money. What do you got?
No investment needed. In fact, it's super easy, and there's creation tools we can use to record our podcast right from the phone or computer.
Wait, why would you record a podcast on your phone? You want? No, never mind. Where do I put my money for this?
I don't need any of your money. We can even get our podcast distributed to big streaming platforms like Spotify and Google Podcasts.
Oh, I get it now. We're talking big business here, okay? So you're going to need a lot of money from me. How much money are we talking here?
No, definitely don't need any of your money. In fact, we can make money from the podcast with no minimum listenership.
Okay. Now I think I'm getting what you're going at here. We need to spend money to make money, so we're talking some big gains here. Big gains.
No, definitely no. I don't need any of your money. Just all we need to make a podcast right in one place.
Okay. So what you're telling me is that you're gonna need a pretty big check from me for this podcast. So do I just make it out to cash? Because it's no problem for me. I'll just write it up right now.
No, listen, Dean, just head over to anchor.fm and check it out. You'll see why Anchor is the best place for us to record, edit, and distribute our podcasts. And I definitely do not need any of your money.
Shut up and take my money. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the second half of our double feature picture show. Coming at you with Arrival. So, David, we have the 2016 movie to pair up with our 97 movie that's a little bit closer to our reality. But for context, did you know that Disney made all the money in 2016 because they had the top 5 grossing films of that year was Civil War, Rogue One, Finding Dory, Zootopia, and The Jungle Book. And this was also this was also the year of the great Oscar mix-up where Faye Dunaway tried to give the Best Picture Oscar to La La Land instead of Moonlight. 2016 was a year.
We're glad they didn't.
Yes, 2016 was the year of the great upset. So that was what Arrival got released into. Much more chaotic than 97. But yeah. Where do you want to get started with this one?
Well, I guess we'll give the quick rundown of the plot because it's not very. This is much more. It's not a thinner movie, I'll say, but it's
got a lot less things it's trying to explore.
Yeah, as well as a shorter runtime and all that. Basically, what we have here is alien spaceships come to Earth. 12 of them. They've landed at different parts of the globe. And our main character is a linguist who teaches the Romance languages at her university. I love the hook to this movie. And she's called upon by the U.S. military as one of the top linguists in the world to start communication with these beings. And that's pretty much where the whole movie goes, is it's a process of figuring out the language, finding out how to really communicate with them, what their true intentions are, becoming connected to them in some ways, and kind of what happens when you do that while other people are focused on other things and other countries are focused on other things.
And how that eventually spirals into China starting some shit.
Yeah.
Movie, prophetic.
A little bit. I'm not going to lie. I would wonder how China feels about that in the Chinese market, but who knows? So yeah, I mean, I guess that's really about what happens in the movie, and then we'll probably end up going through talking about those things because they are points of the production. Mm-hmm. One thing I know Dean brought up, and I think is interesting to talk about, is our main character, the actress that plays her, Amy Adams.
Yes, Amy Adams as an actress, I have some weird issues with her as an actress. Now, she is a good actress. She can play a role, what have you, but it is really hard for me to connect to her when she's playing characters. And I feel like in Arrival, that comes down to the fact that she's playing against a giant 30-foot green screen that's an alien, or she's playing against Jeremy Renner, who is not really giving her enough, or what. But was it just me, or did it not feel like her character work was really coming through, and she just was like reading lines and being kind of blank a lot of the time?
A little bit. Like, this movie, the performance in this movie seemed pedestrian, as I would describe them. All the characters that are showing up on screen aren't like stereotypes or very deep characters. They're just trying to put somebody there that would be in that role professionally and let their interest take over as like the character per se. Mm-hmm. The only problem that I agree with Dean about is that it kind of results in a character with potential, I believe, but when you have that character act the same way as the rest of them in this kind of stoic, quiet way, it results in a lack of connection that I think we could get. I think it also has to do with like this sort of nonlinear plot, kind of. I guess you could argue it's nonlinear, and other factors in that it kind of has this. This is one thing I kind of don't like about modern movies, is they don't, for the sake of keeping the audience's attention, they want to get to the plot as fast as possible. Mm. And they do at least give us a nice intro here where we understand what's going on in Amy Adams' life, her character's life, in that she apparently has a daughter that at some point grows up and gets cancer and dies. Mm-hmm. You know, that's a sad thing, and it'll certainly give you sympathy for a character and kind of explains why the way she is in her normal life. And then you get this kind of interesting scene where there's like only 6 people show up to class because then
aliens showed up.
Yeah, aliens show up to class as well. And there's the problem of going to the parking lot in your car, and going home and thinking, what do I do now? Well, she doesn't do a whole lot because I don't know. It's like I do and don't understand why Denis Villeneuve did what he did to her character, because if you introduce certain things in the beginning, they're spoiler alerts technically to the rest of the movie. But that's kind of the challenge you face then, because now we don't know anything about her other than that she had a daughter that died of cancer.
Well, and that's the thing, because as the movie unfolds and then we get the twist at the end, we can spoil this movie, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, that's, people should come to these episodes having watched the movies. That's the point of the show, guys.
Gotcha. So, because the whole thing is, we find out that Amy Adams, when she is communicating with the aliens, they have this misunderstanding where the aliens are trying to give humanity a weapon, quote unquote, but what it is their language, which once you unlock their language and you have an understanding of it, it lets you perceive time in its entirety instead of as a linear concept. So what we're seeing is Amy Adams experiencing her future and her present all at one time. Because her daughter isn't dead at the beginning of the movie. She's dead, like, I don't know, 15 years later from this point, because she meets Jeremy Renner's character and they get married and they have the daughter, and then the daughter dies like 15 years later. And it gets really, and don't get me wrong, it's an amazing twist. I loved the twist at the end because I didn't see it coming. And I think that's because the movie plays into that concept of, oh, we're going to do the stereotypical thing. We're going to show this woman's daughter dying, and then she's mourning her throughout the movie, and we have the flashbacks to that. And it plays like a traditional, like, story, kind of like that. This woman's in mourning, and she's trying to get over it. And then we find out that, no, we're seeing the future, and she's perceiving it. But it also ruins the whole idea of her character, where I'm like, is that why she acts like she's been in mourning the entire time?
Yeah. Because it doesn't
happen yet?
It's one of those things where, like, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, I feel like if with just, like, a little bit, if you just take 2 steps further in the character introduction, something would make sense and not reveal the plot. Like, okay, what also looks like mourning? Okay, depression is something that happens while you're mourning somebody. So what if she's depressed about something at the beginning of the movie? Or, like we are much more smart about in 2021, you can be depressed about nothing sometimes. That happens when you have a void in your life. And that, I think, is the route I would go, is like show her struggling to find purpose in the beginning of the movie, which is kind of something we deal with a lot, is purpose as a theme, rather than faith in the opposite one. And then you have this very interesting story about a mother's purpose, which I still, that's the point of the movie, even still. And the point of her character is the aliens are connecting to her through a mother's purpose, because that's the purpose of life, is like life reproduces. So what is the simplest way to connect to another life form you can't communicate with yet? Connect with them on the thing that we all also do, is, did you have a baby?
You're like, because everyone does that. Yeah. I don't know. Okay, because this movie, because we talk about the themes of Contact a lot, because that's what it's trying to do. It's a theme movie that's just trying to go through all these, like, pieces of dialogue and drama to get its point across. Arrival, I don't know how deep its theme actually goes.
Yes and no. I think it goes deep enough. I was quite satisfied by the theme, in that there's enough of the world is ending blockbuster stuff in this movie for me to get past, like, more deeper explorations of that. I think it just comes down to, like, for me, kind of, the character web doesn't service that exploration very well. Because all we really have is Amy Adams, Jeremy Renner, who is her colleague and soon to be past / also was baby daddy,
who's a scientist of a undisclosed science.
Yeah, even though I thought he was also a linguist, but apparently is also a scientist through dialogue, which is probably another problem with this movie, is that certain things just only come through dialogue, and it's like, well, you kind of need to do a little more than that.
Yeah. Well, okay, so there's an issue with this movie, and I think it's kind of apparent from the get. The concepts are interesting, the effects are cool, but the characters aren't like the characters are kind of just there to facilitate the story to go on.
Yeah.
Right? And they're not very interesting, if I'm being completely blunt. Like, I don't find Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner's characters all that interesting.
Not really. Like, Amy Adams is like we said, kind of almost there to being interesting. Jeremy Renner is there until he starts being interesting, pretty much only because of the plot.
Mm-hmm.
It almost makes you wonder if he needs to be there.
I don't think half these characters actually need to be there.
I think that,
in all honesty,
yeah, because like Forrest Whitaker's character, I get it. He's the army captain who's supposed to be on Amy Adams' side, but also has to deal with the bureaucrats. Then there's the bureaucratic character who is played by Michael Stolberg.
Yes. Right? Yeah, Michael Stolberg.
And I think he does a good job of being kind of this like stoic asshole, government agent, who kind of needs to be the way he is because it's, all business, not really any religious talk. And
look, I can't wait till we get to the ending section because these movies need a comparison. But yeah, there is a thing with the. Okay, so I think we can both agree that the weakest link in this movie is the characters.
A little bit, because at parts they make sense, and at parts it's just like they're kind of just there.
So why don't we talk about things that we do like? What are the strong suits of this movie? Because I can say right away, the design of the aliens and the language and all the effects and production design is by far superior than Contact.
Oh yeah. It's one of those things where I'm like, yeah, they look weird, and I'm not really sure why they are the way they are, but I'm almost left like more satisfied being like, I'd really like to know why they are the way they are, because there's a little bit of that. It's like I think that the design team probably intended to do that because it's like playing into this human feeling of like wanting to discover, which is part of the whole genre that we're going with, the subject. As well as like the language in itself, very creative with the whole circle, and you have to like kind of like hieroglyphics, kind of like ink blot, but they can, through linguists in their study of language, figure it out. I thought that was interesting. Especially when they start to have just an iPad game with pieces of their language on it.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see all that. Especially, I love the sequences when they go up the tube into the spaceship.
Oh, yeah, where the gravity flips on itself.
Yeah, that's a good exposition sequence, which you don't even realize is exposition.
But yeah, so I feel like there's really cool key points in this movie. And then it's like the also the twist, the concept that the gift the aliens are giving them is the gift of perception, where they'll be able to see time all over the place. And okay, that's the point in the movie where I was like, okay, that's some grade A level bullshit, but it's interesting sci-fi bullshit, so I'll let it slide. But now I'm thinking about it.
What do you mean?
So, David, the aliens gift humanity the ability, like their language, and once you understand the language and embody it, then you'll be able to perceive time all at once instead of just in the moment. You'll be able to see your future and your past and everything all at once.
Yeah.
David, if you learn Spanish, can you perceive all of time all at once?
So this is kind of an interesting thing I was thinking about, right?
Yeah.
Like, as an English-speaking person, English is a very mechanic, Germanic language. It's pretty much all function, what we got going on here. There's like she mentions earlier, the Romantic languages. And I think this is actually a good piece of like subtextual dialogue. The Romantic languages, their purpose was more about evoking feeling rather than, specific function of language. Which is true. I mean, like we've talked about, we both kind of had to learn French at one point / kind of know it. We recognize it.
Yeah.
I feel like French does evoke, like whenever I was learning it and spoke it, does evoke more of a feeling, and that's where I understood it more than I really understood the language itself. And I get that's what they're trying to get away with in this alien language. Of course, as with sci-fi, you're kind of left with this black obelisk moment where you kind of just have to buy into it
because you don't really roll with it,
know how it works. Because it's true. It's like, well, how are they controlling gravity? What's the gas that's like ethereal inside the spaceship? Why do they need that to exist? How do they apparently know what glass is, or a translucent substance like crystalline or something that would mimic glass in its function? Why don't they know at all the chemical composition of the ship? There's like a whole lot of those questions that kind of have to do with leaving things unanswered. And I don't really give a shit if the ship they came in is made of carbon or iron or whatever the hell. Yeah. But it does come down to kind of this idea that, like, well, why would the language be the next step in evolution? Because that's what's going on. It's the next step in evolution. That's what they've given them. So I don't know. I always likened it back to this, like, Space Odyssey moment where it's like, I don't know, why would a monkey touching an obelisk make them all of a sudden know how to use bones as tools?
It's a thing where sci-fi stuff happens, so we're just going on with it.
Yeah, and nitpicking it too much is just kind of like, well, why don't it's like, why don't you find aliens and figure out how they work?
Yeah, I understand. It's just because the idea of being able to perceive all of time at once, like, that's a fascinating concept. Because you basically become a god.
Yeah, and technically, in theory of physics and everything, it's possible. In that, theoretically, it's possible. We have no idea if it physically is possible. But this is kind of a thing that's been introduced in these alien movies. I go back to, again, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Mm-hmm. Interstellar plays with this. This movie, again, tackles this idea that, like, okay, if humans are this part of evolution that was able to master the 3D space, and we have opposable thumbs and, figured out how to use tools, the next step of evolution, apparently, is just, let's jump all the way into the fourth dimension. Not other kind of small things that you think we might figure out, like skin that's, like, UV resistant, all these other things that, like, it's kind of
women's pants with real pockets. Like, we need to solve that part of evolution first. Okay. Yeah. My girlfriend is very angry. Her pants don't have real pockets.
That's fair. Skin pockets. That's what we need next. We need to breed with marsupials. Yeah. So I don't know. It's kind of this. I find this kind of interesting genre shift now, looking at it, where it's like, okay, is cyberpunk the next evolution where we start to, like, mesh with the tools we've made, or is this the next evolution where we just, like,
perceive all of time?
We reach biological singularity and just burst into thin air or whatever becomes of us. I don't know. There's a lot of that spacey whatever the hell. I think it's interesting, certainly, because of the way that the movie employs it in order to make her like this messiah character, where she is put in a unique position as one of the only woman characters kind of involved with this team, where she kind of understands, or these aliens are able to communicate with her, whereas communicating with Guy was probably standoffish. I'm not gonna lie.
This, I don't know how much more I can kind of go on with this, because I kind of felt nothing at the end of this movie, right? Because I enjoyed the film. I thought, I thought a lot of it was like, okay, this is interesting. Things are going on here. This is cool. But credits hit and rolled, and I was like, yeah, I got nothing out of this. I don't feel any different. Like, the themes or ideas it invoked didn't do a lot to make me think. It made me more question the movie. And I don't know. It's one of those things where the concepts in this are really cool. Like, the ideas it's playing around with are fascinating. It's just, it might be my problem as an audience member. I can't latch on to it. I know there are people who love this movie.
Yeah, and I think that it's worth loving. I mean, I think for what it works with, it does a good job. My feelings are that it's a little contained for my taste, where Contact goes all over the place. This is practically a one location movie. You don't really leave that
close.
valley. And it just kind of becomes one of those things where I'm like, that happened. And then we get also this lovely line from Jeremy Renner at the end, "Let's make a baby." Oh my God.
That is like the kind of line you...
I can't believe somebody said that.
That's a line you don't throw out, right? On like a date where you're like, "Hey baby, let's make a baby." Like, no. That is how you sleep on the couch. That is grade A, like, no.
Yeah. I watched this movie with my girlfriend, and
did you laugh at that section?
We both just were kind of like just a step away from disgusted by it because of how that idea is. It's just being so.
It's a little bit of a cringy line too.
It was at that point I kind of felt like this movie. I don't know if this has happened to you, Dean, but do you ever feel like you could tell when a movie is definitely made by Europeans?
Kind of, actually.
That's kind of how I felt about this in that line.
We're not trying to hate on Europeans, but
y'all got an interesting way of viewing the world, that's for sure.
Yeah, we'll put it like that. But you know what? Let's stop viewing this movie by itself. Let's view this movie with our other movie. Let's get to the wrap-up section, because I think these movies demand comparison.
I think so.
And now, David, I said this before we started recording, and I kind of want to stake my claim on this. Both these movies are good where the other one is bad. Contact has really good performances, really good themes, and really good at exploring them, but its production design is so at best. The effects are pretty mediocre, and the overall payoff to its themes and stuff kind of fall apart. Arrival, on the other hand, really good payoff. The production design, the cinematography is great, but the characters are a little bland, and its overall story is a little not super sprawling. It's very contained. Contact tries to explore as much as possible. Arrival doesn't. So I guess that's kind of my thinking going into this. Am I on the right track here, or am I kind of spouting out of my own ass?
No, I think you are. I would agree that in ways that Contact, excels, the other one doesn't. And I kind of wish there was some sort of like religious thing going on in Arrival, especially when it's a much more global movie. It really is. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're in contact with 12 different countries. The UN, it's like governments are involved in this, whereas Contact, that's not so apparent, but they stick it in there. And on the opposite side, it's like Contact takes this movie about the first contact with alien kind and takes it into this like spiritual journey that doesn't really leave you feeling like you actually saw a movie about aliens. And it's just one of those things where it's like, well, just as I thought Contact was ahead of its time, I thought, well, I get to Arrival and I'm like, well, maybe we still need some time with this. And I think it's just, I chalk it up to this. First contact alien movies are just a tough subject. How can you make a story about it? We don't know anything about how it would happen, pretty much. If it's like Contact, we're going to view it in the, like, we could make a story, but it would be just pretty much how we as humans might see aliens. Even in Arrival, they make references to that being a folly of their approach to aliens like they view conquistadors coming to the Americas. It's like, well, that's not necessarily how it would go if aliens came to Earth, because if you figure out 4-dimensional communication and travel across light years, it's like, would you really come to a planet just to enslave another species? I don't know.
It's one of those things where these fall onto 2 different tracks. It's this track of alien invasion movies, kind of like Independence Day. Independence Day is a pretty famous one, and I think a lot of people can view that. That's an alien invasion movie. These aren't really alien invasion movies. These are aliens that come in peace movies, and they try to explore kind of like the implications of contact with things far beyond us.
Yeah.
And one really just goes head first into it, even if it's not all that thought out or clean. It at least tries. The other one narrows in and just tries to just look at it, but still keep it a little bit, still keep it really personal.
Yeah.
But I don't want that. I don't want that because the character's not that interesting. I want the scope. If Arrival had a bigger scope, oh, that movie would be fantastic. But, Contact has that scope, but it decides not to. Okay, I'm just gonna be crude. It builds me up, but it doesn't let me finish at the end. Like, yeah. That's what's happening. I'm getting teased, and it just doesn't happen, and it's very angry. Arrival's just trying to get you there, and then leave with your $20.
And then it tells you, "Let's make a baby."
And then it tells you, "Let's make a baby." Again, like.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. I will say that this 2 things I'm going to take away from this viewing is that it makes me almost like more excited to find out if there's a conversation between Robert Zemeckis and Denis Villeneuve on these subjects and like their differing approaches, as well as it gave me some ideas for how you could transform this genre. I'm going to play my cards close to my chest because they also might be stupid ideas, but I don't know. I think it was a worthy introduction to our delving into science fiction, in that this is kind of what happens when maybe science fiction would bleed into nonfiction, if you could say.
And yeah, I guess I would agree with that. But David, I got to ask the question that we ask when I remember. So, this weekend, if people could only watch one of these movies, which one should they watch? Is this one of those things where your opinion changed halfway through the episode?
It's kind of, but it also might still be a coin flip. Because now that I think more and more about it, Contact is generally, it keeps you going throughout most of the movie until it might, for some people, it might get them right where you need them. And it's just that we're movie nerds, so we need more. But for some people, that might be like a transformative movie. For an Arrival might be the opposite, where for some people, they might not get it at all. And for some people, it might be something that they are worshipping at the altar of because they're just interested in something that's spacey. Go figure. I don't know. I feel like if you're into Black Mirror, go for Arrival. If you're into, well, per se, Black to the Future, that'd be an interesting one to watch. Back to the Future, go watch Contact. It's kind of 2 different strokes for 2 different folks.
Yeah, I think that's kind of it. This is one of those apples and oranges kind of double features.
Oh, actually,
honestly, yes.
I'll put it this way. If you're into Jeremy Renner saying, "Let's make a baby," go watch Arrival. If you're into watching a suave, slick-back-haired gentleman seduce you under the starlight in Venezuela, go watch Contact.
Also, the guy who's seducing you is talking a lot of Jesus, but whatever. We'll leave that out. But yeah, so... I'm sorry, now I'm just imagining Jeremy Renner saying "let's make," and I just can't right now. I can't compose.
But yeah, so
I guess that's kind of the thing. I think this is actually kind of what we've been looking for in terms of like the perfect double feature, because they both complement each other in great ways. the time span ain't actually that hard. Like I had a pretty comfortable viewing of these movies. I think even the themes play pretty well together. How do you think this fares in terms of the double feature valuometer or whatever we're gonna call it? How good is this as a double feature?
Oddly enough, I agree. I think that because of what these two movies are and how they complement each other, you actually end up coming up with a double feature that would be worthy of like that post-viewing Q&A with the director. I feel like that's always what we're looking for. We're looking for the one that it's like they would play in a movie theater and afterward the director comes up to talk about one of them or both and how they whatever the discussion would be. And that's maybe where I'm getting that feeling of like I want to see Zemeckis and Villeneuve in a conversation about these two. But yeah, I agree. It's a pretty good double feature, all things said and done.
Honestly, that's kind of how this movie feels. It feels like Contact starts the conversation and Arrival responds to it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd say this was probably a pretty solid double feature. But next week, David, we stop it with this whole aliens as these nice, fancy things that come in and help humanity. Now we're going to be looking at some aliens that show up and try to fuck with us, and we're going to fight back. Because what are we watching next week, David?
Yes, next things get down and dirty, and especially scary when we watch Aliens and Predator. Not the original Alien, the sequel Aliens by James Cameron.
Yes, two of arguably the greatest action films of all time. I know Aliens is put up on that pedestal a lot, and Predator, like that's one, like I will not lie, Predator is one of my favorite films of all time. That movie is fantastic. I love it to death. It has so much testosterone in that movie. You will grow a beard. It's great.
Yeah.
And Aliens, again, greatest female heroine in all of cinema. Ellen Ripley is in it, and it's awesome. I can't wait to watch these two movies.
I think it's going to be good. Well, I guess to follow along with us next week, so you can watch sweaty men run around in the jungle, as well as sweaty women run around a space station. You can go to wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe to us on Spotify. Apparently we're on Apple Podcasts now, or Apple Music rather, as it is called, since there's no more iTunes. I mean, there's a callback for you. As well as other places that podcasts are found, Radio Public, Overcast, so on and so forth. You can find all the links to our anchor in the comments. You can also go to our YouTube channel, where we post this, as well as our sister podcast that Dean does with his lovely girlfriend, The Film Club. They do one film every week in case you can't handle 2 scoops of movie badness on this show, as well as a couple episodes of our kind of hobby podcast in which we watch things that you will find hard to come by, too obscure for TV. It's a fun watch. We'll probably do one sometime again soon. And if you want to follow along with us without listening to our voices, you can find us on Instagram or our TikTok. Those are our social medias. Instagram is DD_double feature picture show. And TikTok is just going to be double feature picture show.
And David, I think that's about it. We're gonna go. We're gonna live long and prosper. And I'm gonna say peace, because I'm gonna go find some aliens out in the desert and go drink.
Aliens or peyote? We'll see. But I wish you well. Until next week.
Until next week.
See ya.